Welcome to the No Rest for the Vivid podcast. My name is Claire Hill, self-belief coach, as well as business coach and founder of the Vivid Business Club. I am here today with Vicki Weinberg. Welcome, Vicki, to the No Rest for the Vivid podcast. Lovely to have you here.
Hi, Claire. Thank you so much for having me.
We were just saying that it's so wonderful because you have your own podcast, which I'd love to talk more about. Having these conversations, because when you first start out with these conversations, they can be so daunting when you're not used to them. So it's just wonderful that you're here sharing your value and ready to tell us all of your business stories. Tell me what role do you have? Where do you come from? Just who are you, my love?
Okay, so I'm Vicky. So I live in Kent, in the southeast. I'm sure most people know where
You
Kent
live
is.
in Kent?
Yeah, I
Oh,
do.
so do I. Whereabouts?
Tunbridge.
Oh, I'm in Medway. Not too far.
No, not far at all.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Oh, sorry for interrupting. I just got really excited.
No, no problem. It's nice, isn't it, when you can make connections with people? I think that's
Yeah.
great. And so I do two things. So I have a consultancy where I help businesses sell on Amazon. So I help people who want to take their products on there. So they've got an existing products business and want to explore Amazon as a platform. And then I work with businesses who are selling their products on Amazon already, but maybe something isn't going quite right. Maybe they have a problem, or maybe they just want to improve their sales. All kinds of things, really. And then alongside that, as you mentioned earlier, I have a podcast, and my podcast is for product business owners. And every week I interview a different business about their products, about what inspired them to start their business, about the journey of actually doing it, things they've learned, things they can share with other people. And then I also interview experts who can help people. So I've spoken to accountants and people who can give legal advice and copyright, all sorts of topics, but it's all aimed at helping people sell their products.
I love that. Now, Amazon, for some people just hate Amazon, don't they?
Yeah.
Um, but I actually love it. How did you fall in love with that with Amazon? I suppose it's got to have a love to it for you to be able to support people in such an effective way.
Yeah, so what happened is, so after, I won't go all the way back, but after my second child was born, we'll start there. I wasn't doing anything at the time. I had a yoga business, but I couldn't teach yoga because I just had a little baby. And I was looking for like, what else could I do? Because I'm not very good at not doing anything. And I say not doing anything, I had two kids to look after. I wasn't like idle, but I
Yeah.
wanted to do something, earn some money, just keep my brain ticking over. And I decided that I was going to launch a brand of baby products. So I had a brand designed, manufactured, which is all a process in itself. And then I started selling them on Shopify, but quite quickly decided to also put them on Amazon. And I did really well on Amazon at that time, which was, gosh, I don't know, 9 years ago. I've I was doing really well. I sort of quickly realized that actually I was getting more sales on Amazon than I was on Shopify. And so I really leaned into that and started looking at, okay, how can I improve? What can I add to this? And I got quite good at it, I think, because it's a platform. It's for a seller. It's not actually that easy. It's not actually very
Mm.
good, in fact. But I kind of just got used to it and I was doing well. And then I would get people contacting me and saying, oh, do you think I'm having this problem? Do you know what to do? And I was like, yeah, I'll help you out. And it really came from there. I just saw it was a good opportunity. And I ended up doing what I did now, though, mainly because so many people were asking me, oh, do you know how to do this? And I say, yeah, and I'd help them. And my husband kept saying to me, you should be charging for that. You were just doing this for free. But back then, I was just like, well, who am I to charge people? Because
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. I don't have any credentials or qualifications. I'm just another small business owner. And I genuinely resisted for so, so long because I was just like, who am I to ask people for money?
Mm. Yeah, I think we've all been in that situation. So how did the next step develop? Do you remember the first person that you helped and they gave you
Yes.
money?
Yes, because what I did eventually, and because I still wasn't sort of confident enough to see myself as a business even, what I did is I set myself up on a freelancer site and I just put, some of the things that I could do. I just thought, what things could I do to help someone else who's struggling with Amazon? And it was really small things at the time. And I just sort of went and set up some, I think they can't remember what they call them, gigs or something. And I put them on this freelancing site. And I thought, well, I'll see if anyone gets in touch. And then someone did get in touch. And funnily enough, I'm still working with that person today. Can you believe that? It's the first
Wow.
person I ever worked with. Yeah, he's never left. Which is not like, we know we're not in contact day to day, but yeah, still doing work for him now, which is brilliant. And then it sort of grew from there because someone will work with you and then they'll leave you a review. But back then it was a lot of finding people that needed my help and sort of saying, oh, I can help with this. And I'm sure you could sort of relate, trying to make sure you're
Mm.
really competitive on price so that people want to work with you. And I did that for quite a few years, but then eventually was like, I don't want to just be a freelancer. I started having more confidence. I do know what I'm doing. I am adding value. Set myself up as a business and sort of came away from the freelancing platforms and work with clients directly. And I think positioning myself differently has really, really helped.
Mm.
Um, I feel like there's something about when you position yourself as a business owner, consultant, whatever you call it, I just feel like people see you more as an expert than if than when I was a freelancer. And I don't know why there's that shift, but I've definitely noticed it. I think I feel it a bit myself, but I definitely notice in the way that other people treat you as well.
It's an identity thing, isn't it? Because you, by giving yourself that label with someone with society in society has a higher authority, but also just owning it. It's like you go all in. If you're a freelancer, are you attached to a specific role or expertise? But then if you're a consultant, or like you said, you're now going, no, that's my niche, that's my superpower. I'm claiming it, and then people are like, oh, hello, she's got her light on. I'm gonna get in her taxi.
Yeah, and I think as well, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone either, is that when I was freelancing in that Amazon space, there were lots of other people doing the same thing.
Mm,
And I'm not being disrespectful because some of them were really, really, really good, and I think they were doing really good work. But of course, there would have also been a pool of people who weren't.
yeah.
And I think that doesn't help either because I feel like, yeah, I feel like when you it probably didn't help that I think some people I was speaking with, I think had almost a distrust immediately of someone who was freelancing in that space because perhaps they'd worked with someone before and they didn't have the results they expected. So you were having to prove yourself. I felt I was having to prove myself a lot more just
Mm,
by calling myself a freelancer and not being
mm.
like, no, actually, I'm an Amazon expert. And yeah, I think that shift really, really changed things.
So take me through the journey that when someone starts working with you, where are they usually at? What are the things that they're finding most challenging at that time when they come to you, and what's the transformation that you take them on?
So if they are not selling their products on Amazon already, they are usually at a place where most of the time they know that's what they want to do. So they've identified it would be a good opportunity. I do get some people who come to me and they're not sure, and I can work with them to figure out whether it is a good fit or not, because I don't think it's a good fit for everyone. And I will say that now that I'm not just going to take everyone's money and get them set up on Amazon, because there are some products that for very different reasons just it wouldn't be a good fit, and
Mm.
that's not fair to take someone through the process when I know that ultimately it's perhaps isn't going to work for them. So most of the time, yeah, they're thinking they want to get set up on Amazon, and genuinely, they've either started looking into it and got stuck, or they're just completely overwhelmed because it's really, really hard. As I mentioned earlier, it's not an easy
Mm.
platform. And I'm not just saying that so people pay me, because you absolutely can do it yourself, but it's not easy. They really don't make it simple. It's not very intuitive. It's not a great platform. I hope Amazon don't listen to this, but they probably know. It's like
This
it's like
podcast
something
isn't
from
sponsored by Amazon. It's okay.
it's like something from the 90s.
Yeah.
It's really hard to use. And I think a lot of people, they get started and then they're pulling their hair out because it's difficult. And then they come to me. So what I then do in that situation is I can take everything, literally everything off their hands. If
Wow.
I can just get them all set up and sort of minimize the involvement they have to have if they don't want that. So I can work with customer services and fix any issues. I can get everything set up and yeah, and then just come back to them and say, here you are, everything's ready. And then I work with them as well to give them advice on how to get their first sales, because once you get set up, that's kind of one thing, but then actually getting your sales going is another. And you can have the most amazing product listings in the world, but that doesn't mean people will find them, unfortunately, just because of the size of the platform. So I work with people to get their first sales as well. And then the other people who come to me might be coming because they've got some sort of problem that I can solve for them. So something they're not sure how to do, or they've got stuck somewhere, or maybe they have been on selling for a while and either their sales are starting to plateau, or maybe sales just have never got to, where they think the potential is. And then I would come in and look at what they've got and what they've done and then suggest what we could do to see improvements. Yeah, so those are the main people that I work with. And in both of those instances, they do see a real transformation, because either they go from not having a business on Amazon to having one, and having one that makes them lots of sales, or they go from already being there, but not seeing the potential to actually seeing quite a big improvement in their overall sales.
So what kind of products work well and what don't? Because I think as a user of Amazon, I I love it because you can literally buy anything. I'm really daunted by clothes on Amazon though. My husband buys everything on Amazon, but it's either Tesco, Sainsbury's sometimes if he wants to treat himself, or it's Amazon. And it's sort of like that. He doesn't go to any other shops. He's just basic Barry, sort of. Sorry, Barry's. Barry, I was just thinking Barry's are dying out, aren't they? Poor name. But anyway, so he's basic Barry with that. But there are such a wide range of products available. It's interesting to hear that some products won't work. So I'm interested, what works really well, what doesn't?
Okay, so what works really well? Believe it or not, grocery products work really well on Amazon. You might not think it, but they
Wow.
do. So, and actually, I was saying this to my husband the other day, that if you wanted, say, to buy, I don't know, so we were looking at what we are looking at buying the other day, guacamole. He wanted some guacamole for something. And I said to him, you'd probably get a really nice product from a small business who's making everything in small batches on Amazon more easily than you would in Tesco, which is where we shop, because there's so many barriers to getting a food product on the shelves in a supermarket. Of course, it happens, but for a small business, it's a lot harder to do that than it is potentially to sell that product on Amazon. So I think there are lots of great grocery food and drink brands on Amazon.
Oh,
And I know
wow.
people might not think of that, but if I was looking for something different, like I was looking recently for non-alcoholic drink options, I went straight to Amazon because I know I'm going to get something that I might not get in Tesco. Because I think people think, oh, Amazon's not great for small businesses. But actually, if you look in the food and drink category, of course, there are lots of massive brands there, but there are loads of smaller businesses there as well. And I think that's a really good example of where, as a small business, you can get in front of more customers potentially. Because as I say, in that, especially in that food and drink space, I think it could be really hard. So that's one example. So beauty and healthcare products do well on Amazon. There are lots of products that do, and I think what makes a bigger difference, I think, well, there's two things. One is that rather than, I think, thinking of categories, so there's just example of some categories, but in terms of your product and figuring out whether it's a good fit on Amazon, um, I would say where it is can be harder is if you are going into a space where there's loads and loads of competition. So, for example, when I sold my baby products, I use this example a lot. One of the products I had was a baby towel, and it was, at the time, it was the biggest towel for babies you could buy. It was made from bamboo, it had no chemicals in it, it was organic, it was the thickest and the biggest you could buy on Amazon at that time. So while there were other baby towels on Amazon, I had a really clear USP, because I could, all those things I've just listed, I could be like, this has got this, and this, which these other
Yeah.
products don't. So it was actually therefore it wasn't easy, but it was relatively easy for me to get onto Amazon and for people to buy my product, for me to start making sales.
Mm.
If I was launching a baby towel now, I'm not sure I would unless it was something really unique. But the exact product that I launched then, I'm not sure I would put on Amazon now, because there are so many baby towels on Amazon. And the exact
Mm.
product that I was selling then, because I'm not selling those products now, but if I was to launch that now, I just feel like there's going to be so much competition in that category. I'm not going to look, but I bet if I search now, there'll be people with like tens of thousands of reviews, which
Oh,
makes it so
wow.
hard to get started. So that isn't me saying that if you're selling a baby towel, don't put it on Amazon. But I think my example is more to say you need to think about what else is on Amazon similar to your product. And if there are other products, that's a good thing, especially if they're selling, that's a good thing because it means there
Mm,
is demand. But you've got to think about where your product fits in relation to the others, like what makes yours different. Because if
mm,
yours is just an exact replica of something else that's on there, and I'm sure it won't be, but if it were, I think it'd be really hard now to differentiate yourself and for a customer to see why would I buy this product that's got no reviews, let's say, because it's brand new
mm,
and looks the same as this product that's got, I don't know, 5,000 five-star reviews. You see, it's tricky. So that would be, I don't know if that's a long-winded way of answering the question, but it's never black and white, is it? And that's why when I work with people, I will speak to them about whether I think their product's a good fit and also about how to position it as well.
mm. What is your biggest success with somebody that you've worked with on Amazon?
That's really hard. I always find it really hard to quantify things. I don't know why. That's something I need to get better at, actually. My business coach told me that. It's it's really hard to quantify. I always think, and I wish I had something to hand. Um, I think from a personal perspective, I'm always really pleased when I can launch a brand on Amazon and then, keep checking in with them and I can see they're doing well and they're making sales and they're getting good reviews because that's ultimately what it's all about.
Yeah.
Um, I just want everyone I work with to do really, really well.
Yeah. And it must be such a sense of accomplishment when you see that they're, from zero to nothing on Amazon to then having that, the reviews are coming in, the money, the sales are coming in. That must be so wonderful because you've literally created something from nothing. And it sounds like it's a bit of a ball ache doing it in the first place.
It
And you
really is. It really is. And I'm always really proud of anyone that like does it because especially if they've done it themselves, because sometimes people come to me and they've already got their products on there, but they say, oh, but I'm not making many sales. But I always think, well done for actually getting there because it's not easy to just even get your products listed, as I said earlier. And that's not to scare anyone off. It's possible, but it is, let's face it, it's work, it's hard work.
mm,
So I think everyone who's done it should feel really, really proud of themselves, even if they're not quite where they want to be right now. You've still
mm,
done it, which is amazing. You've spent the time and the commitment to get your products listed, and that's a really good basis to grow from, isn't it? So
yeah,
don't worry if
absolutely.
you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I'm on there, but I'm not where I should be. Don't feel bad at all because you've done a big chunk of the work already.
And what about handmade businesses? How well do they do?
Well, I always used to say that I didn't think Amazon was a good place for handmade businesses, but I since started working with a handmade business and they actually do well on Amazon, not as well as they do on Etsy,
Mm,
but better than I would have initially predicted. They were already on Amazon when I worked with them and I did some work to improve the SEO and just tidy up the listings and get things working. And she is getting of certain products do sell really, really well. So I think of handmade products, I think it is product, as I said before, it's sort of product dependent because this business makes a whole range of products and some of them are selling really, really well on Amazon and some not as well. And I think that's just down to what people are looking for on Amazon. In general, I still say, despite that, if I was selling handmade products, I would focus on Etsy first because Etsy is all about the handmade products. And then if you're doing well on Etsy and you've got your everything sort of stable or you've got to a point where you think, okay, I don't need to focus on that day to day, then maybe I would look at Amazon. But I would perhaps not, depending what I sold, put all of my handmade products on Amazon because of the time and effort that it takes. I
mm.
would go either with the things that I can see have the most potential, maybe there's a gap, or the things that I know to be my best sellers. But I wouldn't sell on Amazon handmade over my own website and Etsy. I'd have those two in place and running well first.
Because I suppose with Amazon, there is this expectation that customers expect it tomorrow. oh, and it, of course, the expectation of time. Um, what I love about Amazon, though, I'm trying to sort of put all of the things that I don't need immediately in the basket so they all come at the same time. I think you can get in the habit of, oh, I'll just buy it right now, and I'm just being aware of, global CO2 and all of that. But with handmade businesses, there's a barrier, isn't there, of having something that's going to be handmade to order that, is that, does that create more of a bad barrier for Amazon customers if they've got to wait longer for the product?
I don't know, if I'm honest. I feel like customers, especially if something's been personalized, I think customers do understand they're going to have to wait a little bit longer. I do I do still think a lot of customers forget that handmade on Amazon is a thing, and won't necessarily be looking for handmade products. Because what I was talking to my client who's doing well on there yesterday, actually, interestingly, is we were talking about the fact that the products that do well are products that people are probably searching for, not in the handmade category. They're typing in the search bar for that product, and then they find it, and then they go, oh, I can have this personalized, because as well as being handmade, they're personalized. And that's what we think is probably happening, rather than people looking for the personalized version of
Right.
that product, if that makes sense. So I'm sure that there are some sales she's not getting because people are going, well, I can get it for less money and quicker if I just buy this
Mm,
this standard one. Um, there will be some people, I think, who aren't buying for that reason, but then I guess they're not your customer
mm,
anyway. They probably, if they're looking for that product and they're looking, they're basing it on price or wanting it tomorrow, they probably weren't going to go and buy it on Etsy or on your website anyway, I would
yeah.
say.
And do you think it's very much part of people's culture, or not culture, but perception of like Etsy for handmade, Amazon for that? It's going to maybe take a bit of time for people to shift to know that Amazon's for handmade as well.
I think so, because as I say,
Yeah.
I do think people are finding handmade products on Amazon sometimes by accident. I don't know if
Yeah.
they're always looking, because you can't always even tell that products are handmade,
No.
I think. So I do think that is probably the case.
And so tell me the story of the podcast. How did that begin and how long has it been running?
Oh, a long time now. So over 4 years. So that actually started because when I launched my product business, I had a blog, and I was doing that thing that lots of us did years ago. When you just have a blog and you're sort of writing what you're doing, and not like personally, but I mean, I was sort of like, I'm launching these products and this is what I'm doing today. And I was kind of just chronicling, that's the right word, everything I was doing, thinking this might be interesting or useful to somebody. And it was like a real like lifetime, as, oh, my first shipment arrived and that kind of thing.
Oh, I love it.
um, Talking about, I've got my Shopify, I've got on Amazon and everything else. And I started to get people contact me about that as well. So people were coming to me and saying, oh, I'm just looking to launch a product and can you help me with this? Because actually, I should have said that's something else I used to help people with, was the product creation side as well. I don't anymore. I should put that out there. If you don't mind me mentioning, I published a book
Oh,
last
definitely.
year. And that's kind of what I offered. Someone who's interested in creating a product, the book is a great resource, but I don't offer those services anymore just because I'm sort of all in with Amazon now, and there's only me, so there's only so much I can do. So I'm sort of niching down a bit more. But yeah, I was getting people contacting me, and I decided that maybe I loved podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I really liked the idea of having a podcast, but like with everything that I've done, it took me a long time to kind of realize that I could be a podcaster, because obviously that's just a label you give yourself. No one has
Yeah.
to no one has to say, oh yeah, you're officially a podcaster. So it took me a while to get there, but the podcast was designed to go alongside the blog. So some of it is me sharing things that I've learned that are useful for people. But then I also realized that my experience was my experience, but everyone else had their own. So the idea always was that I would speak to other product businesses, because I I'm not the expert. I've had my experience, but someone else could launch even like the same similar products to mine and have just a completely different experience and learn different things. Um, and that's what I really wanted to do. It's kind of the podcast I wished that I could have listened to. Because when I was launching, I was listening to podcasts, but I was finding a lot of them were from people that were like way ahead of where I was. And I found it really unrelatable.
Mm,
They're talking about the millions that they're making. And I was like, well, I'm not even making hundreds at the moment. And it was um I just felt like the gap was too big. So I
Mm.
wanted to speak to real people based in the UK. It's a lot of women that I have on. You don't have to be a woman to come on my podcast. It just happens to be a lot of women. A lot of them happen to be mums. Again, you don't have to be. It's just the way it is, and just people talk really honestly about the reality of starting and running a small business and all that that involves.
Oh, I love that. I think, I had exactly the same situation. My podcast coming up for 3 years, and that moment where you I remember I'd recorded some of the first episodes, and it took me ages to actually say it's going out today, and there it is. And I just had all of these doubts in my head that people were gonna, what's she doing a podcast for? I was gonna listen to that. And then now, you know, nearly 3 years on, it's just part of it. It's just part of the work. And I find it very one, I get to talk to amazing people like you. I mean, that this is our job. How great is that? But also just having those moments of bringing myself together in a way of talking something through in a podcast episode, which can allow people to learn so much from that episode, from that moment that I had in my business growth or my self-development, that then helped so many people. There was somebody that and I know she listens. So if you message me about the episode you listened to, this is shouting out to you. You'll know who you are. But this person that I've worked very briefly with, and she said, "Oh, I've just listened to your podcast and it's just got me out of a funk. Thank you so much." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What episode did you listen to?" And then she reeled off about 5 or 6. She just binged it all day, and I thought, "Oh my goodness! Like my podcast is binge worthy." Even though I'm 200 odd episodes deep now, like that kind of, it's a lovely validation, isn't it? That you think, oh, okay, um, it's good to keep showing up when you don't know who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. It's just I think you keep showing up and people keep listening. And yeah, I love that. I love it when people, as you say, will say, "Oh, this made a difference," or "I learned
Yeah,
this," or because that's what it's all about. I mean, obviously you want the listeners and it's nice, if more people listen. But for me, I get most excited about reviews or
yeah,
people saying, reaching out and either asking a question or saying, "Oh, this was really interesting," just any sort of feedback, but mainly because I'm not doing it for I'm not doing it to rise up the podcast charts. I
no,
don't, that's not the plan, is it? I
no,
think we're both doing our podcast because we love talking about the subject and, like you say, meeting people, hearing other people's experiences. I say all the time, a podcast is the favorite thing I do.
yeah.
Um, and if that could be the only thing I did, it would be because it's just so much fun.
Yeah, it really is that much fun. I think, especially when you work on your own, like obviously we do, having that moment where you're having a conversation that is about what you love to do in your work. And I don't know about you, Vicky, but my husband's had his ears full. He's done with everything that I've got to talk about with my business. So finding other people that you can share those stories with, or oh, what about an idea? It's sharing those ideas, isn't it? And just how you can meet in people, how it can expand how you think about your own business, about the people that you help, and how then this conversation then will go on to help other people. I just love it. I love it.
Me too. And also, I am genuinely so curious.
Yeah.
Like, I love finding out why people did things or how they came up with ideas. I go down some right rabbit holes when I speak to people because depending on what it is they do, there's all these things I think I didn't know that. And I do ask them really what I think are quite daft questions, but hopefully they're the questions that everyone else is thinking in their heads because I'm just fascinated. I just think it's just brilliant to just find out more about someone and their business. And then what I really love as well is that the businesses that come on my podcast will quite often say, "Oh, after the episode went live, they got a few more sales." And I think it's because people have got to hear that person and they've heard the passion and the story. And I just think that's so important, isn't it? And I'm not as good at doing it myself, but I love putting other people in a spotlight like that and sharing like who they are and what they're about.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing, if anybody's thinking about starting a podcast, it is terrifying in the beginning, but then once it becomes part of your working week and your habit, it just becomes part of the way you do things. But it's such a fantastic part of a marketing strategy. So my no rest for the podcast, no rest for the vivid, as for you, it's part of that nurture content, because people get to learn about us as people, how we help people, how we talk to you, if you were going to become a client. Before you need to give us any money, just go and listen to our podcast and you'll get to know us inside out. But also attracting new people in and giving the opportunity for people who may feel quite shy about being visible and showing up. This is nurture content. This is people buy from you because of you. It's, the products help, but if you fall in love with somebody's character or what their mission is or what they're here to do, it's so much easier to give you for you to give them your money, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
so much easier.
And as you say, for us, I don't really like doing anything that I consider to be salesy. I just find it very, I'm not great at it. But I do feel like the podcast is, as you say, it's a really good point of entry because people can listen to me talking and they can like me or not, like,
Mhm.
because you're not for everyone. But I kind of like that you've almost pre-qualified yourself. So if someone contacts me and they say they've heard me through my podcast, I
Yeah.
already know, well, look, you obviously know enough about me. You think, that I feel like you've gone a step further. It's not like a cold introduction where the person has to try and figure you out a bit and, are you what they're looking for? They kind of already made up their mind, I think. And that's really nice as well.
Yeah, that's true actually, because I don't have as many, discovery calls, connection calls, what is what I call them. Because people will find me, they'll see me, find me on Instagram usually. They'll go and listen to the podcast and then they'll ask to work with me. It sort of cuts out that they've allowed themselves that space to make that decision if I'm the right person to work with them as well. It's not like a pressurized 30 minutes, let's get down to business sort of thing. It's they've listened to hours of me talking, they've made that decision. It's such a more organic decision for them. And usually it's and I'm sure the same for you. People will say, "Oh, you got into my brain. I could hear you say a certain thing," or "Oh, I was thinking about something you said in this episode, and I knew that I had to work with you." And that it just shows that it's worth being brave to launch it and put it out there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also you can use podcasts. So if anyone listening, I think you can also use podcasts. Say, for example, I sometimes will get people email me and ask me a question, and I'm like, well, actually, you can listen to this podcast episode where I go into it in real depth.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's really useful as well because now podcasting is kind of the thing that I find easiest. Because I sort of before I sort of started my own business, I had a copywriting background.
Ah.
Well, I worked in corporate communications, but I did lots of writing training. And so I was a good writer, which I think is what helped me and still helps me with Amazon. So a blog for me originally was a really good fit because I liked writing and I've said I've written a book, I enjoy writing. But actually I find it much easier to express myself in a podcast now. And I still have a blog, but now the blog posts are based on the podcast because obviously it's so easy now to turn a podcast episode into a blog post. And I really like that. I just feel it's so much easier to get something across, particularly if it's a big subject or it's something complicated. It's much easier to just talk it through. And I think for a lot of people, it's becoming a way that people want to learn and hear things as well. Like I
Mm,
know for myself now, if I've got the option of reading a post on something or listening to something on audio while I'm walking the dog, I know which one I'm going to choose.
mm.
And I think that's also just really helpful, especially if you've got things you want to talk about, things you want to share, like genuinely useful content. I think podcasting can be a really nice way of doing that.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree. Can you share, like with this podcast, I want to share more stories of when people have faced big doubts, big fears, imposter syndrome, and they've managed to move to the next step with them, move with them. I find, and like you were saying about some podcasts out there, they say that they've faced hurdles and they've got through that, but the nitty gritty of it, I don't feel is shared enough. And I find sharing stories like that gives me a lot of comfort, and especially the other people I work with. Have you got any of those stories that you can share?
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think one where I can give you some specifics. Because I'll be honest, every time I've made a change or even in something like a perceived small change, like for example, I mentioned I used to offer services to help people create their products as well as selling on Amazon. Even like something that's relatively small, like when I decided, okay, I'm not doing that anymore and I'm just focused on Amazon. Every time I've made any sort of change, I've been terrified. I've been terrified of what people will think and what people will say. I don't know who I think these people are, by the way. I'm terrified of them anyway. And it's kind of can hold you back a bit, I think. That fear of, oh, what will people think about me doing that? And the first thing I'll say to that is, I've learned now that no one actually notices. They really don't. I think most people don't notice what you do, what you say. And if they do, most of them also don't care
Yeah.
either. So I think that's worth saying. When I launched a podcast, let's talk about that one, because that was a big thing for me that I was like, because I loved podcasts so much. I found it really hard to think about myself as a podcaster and having my own podcast. And then of course there's all the like practical things around it. Like I just thought, I don't know what to do. Like, how do you have a podcast? You don't just record into your phone and then, put
Yeah,
it
yeah.
somewhere online. There was that as well. So something that helped me get over that was really educating myself. This won't work for everyone, but for me, I always feel more in control and more confident when I've got a plan. So what I
Mm,
really looked into, okay, if I'm going to launch a podcast, what do I actually need to do to get from now to having a podcast?
mm.
Um, and so I really looked into that and I came up with a plan and I had a tick list of, you need to have your artwork and you need to have a hosting platform and all of these things. And then I just went through and I did the same when I launched my first product, actually, very similar. I just made myself a list of jobs and ticked them off as I went. Because for me, having like I say, having a sense of like knowing what I want to do, roughly knowing how I'm going to get there, and then seeing myself make progress. Like some of these boxes I was ticking were very, very small, but that kind of kept me going and kept me motivated because I could go, okay, you've done this, you're making progress, you're getting there. Um, so for me, having some sort of plan for everything I've done has always been really helpful.
Because then you're not having to believe in getting the whole thing done. You just have to believe you can take the next step.
Yeah, it makes it much less
Yeah.
overwhelming. And also, like I say, it's the thing of progress as well, because I think not much nowadays can be done overnight. I know some things can, but I'll be honest, I can't do anything really quickly because I've got business, podcast, two kids, dog, all the rest of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I can't do much that quickly. And so for me, if I plan to do something, even just saying, if I said to you today, I'm going to have something done in, even say writing my book was an example, I gave myself,
Mm,
I can't remember how long I gave myself. I think I gave myself 3 months to write the first, no, maybe 4 months, 3 or 4 months to write the first draft of the book. Um, and giving myself a deadline really helped because I'd
yeah.
given the deadline. I also gave it to a writing coach I was working with, so I had some accountability, because that's something else that for me can help. And then sort of knowing that I was going to do it and I was working towards it made it much less, I'm not saying it was easier, but it made it much less daunting than if I was just like, I'm going to write a book at some point, because
Mm.
probably it never would have happened.
Yeah. No, I've got it. I'm turning 40 in December, and I've got so many book ideas, and I think I've started seven, and I have a book that I've written 30,000 words of, and then sort of wanted to change the direction. I know exactly where I want to go with it now. And I haven't started again, but I've got to have it, I'm going to self-publish, have it on Amazon, by the time I'm 40, but having that sort of goal, I'm going to get it done. But just you saying that to me reminds me that I need to break down the plan and then just dedicate, even if I do 10 minutes a day, it's still progress.
The other thing I'll mention, if you don't mind,
Of
that
course,
works for
don't.
me and might work for you and for other people is that where I can, and I know this isn't always an option for many reasons, that where I can, I've also found someone to kind of work with me and give me the accountability. So, for example, with my book, I worked with a writing coach who specializes in writing non-fiction business books. And first thing I did is have a session with her. I got her to tell me all the things I had to do because I didn't know like about editing and yeah, all the editing stages, for example, there was more than I thought, and then proofreading. And so I basically got her to sit me down and tell me all the things I had to do because I am
Mm,
that pedantic. I was like, tell me everything and I'll do it. And that was really helpful to have someone, because I could have figured that out all out for myself, but actually, because I don't have time is something I don't have a lot of. I sometimes just want someone to tell me. So that was really good for that. And it was also really good because I then worked with her to keep me accountable as well.
Mm,
So I said to her, I'm going to send you the first draft, and this is the date I'm going to send it by. And again, that I think depending on your personality, that doesn't work for everyone. But for me, that really works because I was like, I've told someone that I'm going to get it to them by then. And if I don't do that, then that pushes everything else back.
yeah.
Because with the book, as an example, you then have to start thinking about booking in. This will be useful for you, Claire. You have to start booking in like your editor and your proofreader and things like that. And they want a date because they have to schedule your work in around their other commitments. And so that really starts helping because you're like, oh, I can't be late because otherwise I'm messing them around.
Mm.
Um, so I think that's can work really well as well, is that if you get other people involved.
Oh, right. Do you know, I've been interviewed a book coach for business books for the podcast, and I actually said to her about working with her. So I think I'm gonna reach out, and because it's coming up to 8 months, or no, 7 months till I turn 40. So I've got to get started. So thank you for that gentle kick up the bum. I'm gonna do it. Um
And I would say, if you don't mind as well, for anyone who's like, oh, can't pay someone, then I would say maybe just agree with like a friend. Like in your
yeah,
situation, you could say to a friend, I'm going to send you the first draft of my book by this
yeah.
date, even if they read it or not. But just say you've made yourself accountable to someone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. So before I ask you your 10-year question, I want to know what your book's called, what the podcast is, how can people work with you and give you their money?
So my book and my podcast have got the same name, so that's easy.
That's
It's
good.
yeah, it's called Bring Your Product Idea to Life. And if you Google Bring Your Product Idea to Life, you will find the book, you will find the podcast, and of course you can search for the podcast in podcast players. And the book is on Amazon as well as my website. My website is vickyweinberg.com. Maybe we'll put that in the show notes so I
Yeah,
don't have to
definitely.
don't have to spell it
Yeah.
out. It's an I, not a Y, and all of that. But yeah, that's where you can find me. That's the best place to go.
Excellent. Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I ask everybody that comes on the podcast, if what do you know now that you wish you knew 10 years ago?
I think this comes back to something that I said earlier, which is that you do not have to be the expert. I mean, what's an expert anyway? Whose definition is that? Um, I think that in my life, in my career, I have stopped myself doing so many things well, not stopped myself, I've done all of them, but I've wasted so much time by doubting myself and thinking, oh, I'm not qualified to do that. I'm not good enough to do that. But one thing I've learned, and I'd love to tell myself, is that you only need to know more than the person you're helping. If you can make a genuine difference to somebody, it doesn't matter whether you've been doing what you do for 5 years or 5 weeks. If you can help, you can help. And I think that's what you need to focus on. Are you actually adding value? And if you're adding value, then the rest of it doesn't matter. That you just need to know in your heart that you can help this person or this
Yeah.
business. And I think, and that's enough. You don't need to you don't need to have pages of credentials. You don't need to feel like you need to justify yourself. Of course, you want to have results. You want to be able to sort of talk about, what the differences you can make in a real way. But I don't think you should have to be sort of proving that you're worthy of being there. If you know that you can help someone, you've got the solution, that is enough.
I love that. I really love that. I always say to my clients, if you're in your local Audi, how many people in there have got the same expertise as you? And they're usually like, well, no, nobody. It's sort of, well, then you're an expert. Yeah, I love that. But I love the fact that you just need to know a little bit more than the person you're helping. Thank you so much, Vicky. I've loved today and chatting to you. Where can people find you? Do you on Instagram, Facebook? Do you hang out on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm not really on Facebook. I do have a free Facebook group for product businesses. Anyone who runs a product business, they're welcome to join. And I am on LinkedIn as well. So it's Vicky Weinberg. You can find me everywhere. And everything I've mentioned, you'll be able to get to via my website. So all my socials, book, podcast, everything.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Vicky. Thank you so much for
Oh, you're
being here
welcome.
today.
Thank you.
See you later. Thank you.